Wellington adjusted his expensive sunglasses as the black SUV rumbled down the dirt road toward his newly purchased farm property in rural Montana. The tech billionaire had built his empire from nothing, creating software that revolutionized how businesses managed their data. Now, at 35, he owned more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But success had come at a cost. His marriage to Sarah had crumbled under the weight of his obsession with work, endless business trips, and his inability to prioritize anything above his company. The divorce 3 years ago had been bitter and public. Sarah had accused him of caring more about his quarterly reports than their relationship. She wasn't wrong. Had thrown himself into work after their split, buying properties across the country as investments. This Montana ranch was supposed to be his escape, a place where he could clear his head and maybe figure out what came next in his life. His assistant had warned him that the previous owners had left some equipment and personal belongings behind. Planned to have everything cleared out and donate what was useful. He wanted a fresh start, free from reminders of other people's lives and dreams. The SUV pulled up to the main farmhouse, a sturdy two-story building with white siding and a wraparound porch. Stepped out, breathing in the clean mountain air. It was so different from the recycled air of boardrooms and private jets. For the first time in months, he felt his shoulders relax slightly. "Mr. Wellington," his driver and security detail, James, approached with a concerned expression. "There's smoke coming from the chimney. Someone might be inside." Frowned. The property was supposed to be vacant. He had specifically purchased it through a private sale to avoid complications with tenants or squatters. His legal team had assured him the transfer was clean. "Wait here," instructed, though he knew James would ignore that order and follow at a discreet distance. Being worth $12 billion meant never being truly alone. He climbed the porch steps, noting how well-maintained everything looked. The windows were clean, flower boxes held fresh plants, and a small vegetable garden flourished near the kitchen window. This wasn't the work of squatters or vandals. Before he could knock, the front door opened, felt his world tilt sideways. Sarah stood in the doorway, wearing worn jeans and a simple cotton shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked exactly as he remembered, except for the exhaustion around her eyes and something else he couldn't quite identify. She was still beautiful, still the woman who had once made him believe in something beyond profit margins and stock prices. Her voice was steady, but he caught the slight tremor. "I wondered when you'd show up." "Sarah, what are you doing here? How are you here?" The questions tumbled out before he could stop them. "This is my property. I bought it fair and square." "I know." She stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "We need to talk." Hesitated. Seeing Sarah again brought back a flood of memories and emotions he had spent 3 years trying to bury. The fights, the accusations, the way she had looked at him with such disappointment during their final argument. But also the good times, the way she used to laugh at his terrible jokes, how she had believed in him when his company was just an idea scribbled on napkins. He followed her into the house, immediately struck by how homey it felt. The furniture was simple but comfortable. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, and the scent of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator, colorful drawings of animals and houses and stick figure families. "You have kids?" The question came out harsher than he intended. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Yes, I have children." "How many?" "Three." "Triplets." He tried to do the math in his head. "When?" 2 years and 8 months ago." Felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The timing meant Sarah had been pregnant during their divorce proceedings, pregnant while they were fighting over property division and spousal support, pregnant while he was throwing himself into work to avoid dealing with their crumbling marriage. "Are they mine?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "Do you really think I would have hidden your children from you for almost 3 years if there was any doubt?" "Then why? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything during the divorce?" "Because you made it very clear that children weren't part of your plan. Remember our last fight? You said kids would be a distraction from building the company. You said we could think about it in 5 or 10 years when you had achieved your goals." Did remember. He had been 26 then, consumed with taking his startup public, convinced that waiting was the smart financial decision. Sarah had wanted to start a family, and he had dismissed her concerns with spreadsheets and projections about optimal timing for wealth accumulation. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you moved out," Sarah continued. "I came to your office to tell you, but I saw you through the glass conference room walls. You were in a meeting showing investors your 5-year plan. The plan that specifically mentioned how avoiding family obligations would allow you to focus entirely on growth. You looked so confident, so certain that you had made the right choice." "Sarah, I realized that telling you would put you in an impossible position. You would have felt obligated to try to make our marriage work for the sake of the children, and we both would have been miserable. Or worse, you might have seen them as complications to be managed rather than children to be loved." Wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. Hadn't he spent the last 3 years proving Sarah right? His company had tripled in value since their divorce. He had acquired 4 smaller firms and launched 3 new product lines. But he had also worked 18-hour days, missed every holiday, and lost touch with every friend who wasn't directly useful to his business goals. "Where are they now?" he asked. "Outside, playing in the barn." Sarah glanced toward the back of the house. "I need you to understand something before you meet them. They don't know who you are. As far as they're concerned, their father is someone who travels a lot for work and can't visit. They're happy, well-adjusted children, and I won't let you disrupt their lives unless you're ready to be a real father." "How do you know I'm not ready?" Because you showed up here to kick out whoever was living on your new investment property. Because you're wearing a $3,000 suit to visit a farm. Because even now, I can see you checking your phone for messages." Looked down, realizing he had unconsciously pulled out his phone. Sarah knew him too well. "This property," he said slowly. "How did you end up here?" "After the divorce, I used my settlement money to buy this place from the Hendersons. They were retiring and moving to Florida. I thought it would be a good place to raise the children, somewhere peaceful and away from the media attention that follows you everywhere. But I bought this property from the Hendersons just last month. Sarah's expression became guarded. The Hendersons never sold to you. They sold to me 2.5 years ago. But 6 months ago, the bank started foreclosure proceedings. Understanding dawned slowly. You're behind on the payments. Raising triplets alone isn't cheap, even in rural Montana. I've been working as a freelance graphic designer, but clients are scarce out here. I fell behind on the mortgage payments, and the bank sold the debt to an investment company. My investment company realized. Wellington Acquisitions bought your defaulted mortgage. I figured that out when I got the eviction notice with your corporate logo on it. Of all the properties in Montana, you ended up buying the one place I hoped you'd never find. Felt a strange mixture of emotions. His companies owned hundreds of properties acquired through various means, most of them handled by managers he never personally dealt with. He had never looked at the individual files, never considered that real people with real lives were affected by his business decisions. The children," he said again. "Can I meet them?" Sarah studied his face for a long moment. "Why? So you can decide whether they fit into your life plan, so you can calculate their impact on your portfolio." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You just discovered you have 3 children, and your first concern was whether this property legally belongs to you. Your second thought was probably about how this affects your public image and business reputation." She was right again, and hated that she could still read him so easily. His mind had immediately jumped to damage control, to potential custody battles and media leaks, and the impact on his company's stock price. "They deserve better than that," Sarah continued. "They deserve a father who sees them as people, not problems to be solved." "Then help me learn how to be that father." "It's not that simple. You can't just decide to be a parent the way you decide to acquire a company. Children need consistency, patience, love. They need someone who puts them first, even when it's inconvenient." "I can change." "Can you?" Because the I married was passionate and driven, but he was also kind and thoughtful. The man I divorced had become so focused on winning that he forgot why winning mattered. Which one are you now? Didn't have an answer for that. He had spent 3 years becoming exactly what Sarah accused him of being, a man who measured everything in terms of profit and loss, who saw relationships as strategic partnerships and emotions as inefficiencies to be eliminated. Through the window, he could hear children's laughter coming from the direction of the barn. His children. The thought was surreal. "What are their names?" he asked. "Emma, Jack, and Sophie. They're 2.5 years old." "Do they look like me?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "See for yourself." She led him to the kitchen window that overlooked the backyard. 3 small figures were playing in and around an old red barn, chasing chickens and tumbling in the hay. Even from a distance, could see the resemblance. The boy had his dark hair and lean build, while both girls had inherited his sharp features and confident posture. "My God," he whispered. "They're incredible kids," Sarah said quietly. Emma is fearless, always climbing things she shouldn't. Jack is gentle and thoughtful, loves animals more than anything. Sophie is the leader, always organizing games and adventures for her siblings. Watched his children play, feeling something shift inside his chest. These weren't abstract concepts or future possibilities. They were real, living people who had grown up without him. They had personalities and preferences, fears and dreams, and he had missed all of it. I want to know them, he said. Wanting and doing are different things. Being a parent means showing up every day, not just when it's convenient. It means putting their needs before your board meetings and shareholders. I can do that. You say that now, but what happens when your company needs you in Tokyo for a month? What happens when they're sick at 3 in the morning and you have to cancel an important meeting? What happens when they're teenagers and hate you for something you can't fix with money? Had no answers for those questions. His entire adult life had been structured around avoiding exactly those kinds of complications. He had built his success on the foundation of total commitment to his work, of never allowing personal considerations to interfere with business objectives. I don't know, he admitted, but I want to try. Sarah turned away from the window. Trying isn't enough. These children have lived their entire lives without a father. They're happy and secure in their world. I won't let you waltz in and disrupt that unless you're absolutely certain you can commit to being in their lives permanently. Oh, what do you want from me? What would it take to convince you? I want you to understand what you're asking for. Being a father means your life is no longer entirely your own. It means bedtime stories and scraped knees and parent-teacher conferences. It means choosing their school play over a business dinner. It means loving them even when they disappoint you and being there even when it's hard. Felt overwhelmed? Everything Sarah described sounded foreign to his current lifestyle, impossible to reconcile with the demands of running a multi-billion-dollar empire. I need time to think about this, he said. You have all the time you need. But while you're thinking, those children outside are continuing to grow up without you. Every day you wait is another day of their lives you'll never get back. The weight of that statement settled over like a heavy blanket. 3 years of birthdays and first words and bedtime stories lost forever. 3 years of his children learning to live without him. Can I at least see them? Not as their father, just as a visitor. Sarah considered this. They don't know strangers aren't supposed to visit. If you can keep your identity to yourself and just be a normal person for an hour, then yes. But if you hurt them or confuse them, you'll never get another chance. I understand. Do you? Because the moment you walk out that door, you stop being a billionaire and start being just another adult in their world. Can you handle that? Realized he had no idea. When was the last time he had interacted with anyone who didn't know who he was? When was the last time he had been valued for something other than his wealth or influence? I guess we'll find out, he said. As they approached the barn, felt his hands trembling slightly. He had given presentations to rooms full of investors, negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The sound of children's laughter grew louder, and he could make out individual voices now. "Emma, don't climb so high," a small boy's voice called out with genuine concern. "I'm fine, Jack. Look, I can see the whole farm from up here," came a defiant response from somewhere above. "Sophie, tell Emma to come down," Jack pleaded. "Emma knows what she's doing," replied a third voice with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "But maybe come down just a little bit, Em. You're making Jack worried." Sarah smiled at their interaction. "They take care of each other," she explained quietly too. "Sophie usually leads, Jack worries about everyone's safety, and Emma tests every boundary she can find." They reached the barn entrance and got his first clear look at his children. Emma was indeed perched on a hay bale stack about 8 feet high, her dark hair wild with bits of straw, fearlessly surveying her domain. Jack sat cross-legged on the ground, gently petting a barn cat while keeping one eye on his sister's aerial adventures. Sophie stood in the center, hands on her hips, clearly the coordinator of whatever game they had been playing. The resemblance, too, was startling. All three children had inherited his dark hair and strong jawline, though each had added their own personality to those shared features. Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief, Jack's expression held gentle thoughtfulness, and Sophie radiated the kind of natural authority that had helped build his business empire. "Kids," Sarah called out, "we have a visitor." 3 pairs of dark eyes turned toward with open curiosity. He realized he had no idea how to talk to children, especially ones this young. His experience with kids was limited to awkward encounters at charity events, where he usually wrote checks to avoid actual interaction. "Hi," he said, the word coming out more formally than he intended. "Are you here to buy something?" Sophie asked directly. "Mom sells vegetables sometimes." "No, I'm just—" paused, unsure how to explain his presence without revealing everything. "I'm just visiting the area." Emma had scrambled down from her perch with surprising agility and now stood studying with intense interest. "You're wearing fancy clothes for a farm visit," she observed. "Are you from the city?" "Emma," Sarah warned gently, "remember what we talked about asking personal questions." "It's okay," said, surprising himself. "Yes, I'm from the city. These probably aren't the right clothes for a farm, are they?" Jack approached cautiously, still holding the barn cat. "What city? We went to the city once. There were lots of cars and tall buildings." "I live in Seattle. It's a big city with even more cars and taller buildings." "Do you have any animals in Seattle?" Jack asked, clearly the most important question in his world. "No, I don't. Do you like animals?" Jack's face lit up. "I love animals. This is Whiskers," he said, holding up the orange tabby cat. "And we have chickens, and there's a family of deer that visits sometimes, and Mom says maybe we can get a dog someday if we're really responsible." "Jack knows everything about every animal on the farm," Sophie added proudly. "He can tell you which chickens lay the most eggs and which ones are just lazy." "That's impressive," said and meant it. "What about you, Sophie? What do you like to do?" "I like to organize things. Mom says I'm good at making plans and helping everyone work together." Today I planned our treasure hunt game, but then Emma decided to climb instead of follow the map I made. Climbing is more fun than following maps, Emma declared, brushing straw off her clothes. Besides, I can see more treasure from up high. But the treasure was supposed to be specific things, Sophie protested. Like the blue stone by the fence and the funny-shaped stick by the creek. There are lots of treasures you can't put on a map, Emma replied with the wisdom of someone far older than 2.5 years. Found himself genuinely engaged in their conversation. These children had distinct personalities and opinions, complex thoughts that had nothing to do with his business world, but were fascinating in their own way. "Can I see your treasure map?" he asked Sophie. She beamed and ran to retrieve a piece of paper from near the barn door. The map was drawn in crayon with careful attention to detail, showing the barn, house, garden, and various landmarks marked with X's and arrows. "This is really well done," said, studying the map seriously. "You're a good artist and a good planner." "Thank you. Do you want to help us look for treasures? We haven't found the shiny rock yet, and Emma says there might be bird feathers in the old oak tree." Glanced at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "I would love to help," he said. The next hour passed like a dream. Found himself crawling under bushes looking for Sophie's specific blue stone, following Jack's excited explanations about different chicken breeds, and cheering Emma on as she climbed increasingly challenging trees in search of bird feathers. His expensive suit became dirty and wrinkled, his Italian leather shoes covered in mud and hay, but he didn't care. When was the last time he had focused so completely on something that wasn't profit-driven? When had he last been in a situation where his success was measured by whether he could find a shiny rock or climb a fence to reach a bird's nest? "You're pretty good at treasure hunting for a city person," Emma announced as helped her down from a particularly tall oak tree, her pockets full of colorful feathers. "Thank you. You're pretty good at finding impossible hiding places." "I practice a lot. Mom says practice makes you better at things." "Your mom is very smart." "She is," Jack agreed, coming up behind them with whiskers still in his arms and dirt smudges on his cheeks. "Mom knows everything. She can fix the tractor and make really good cookies and tell stories that aren't even in books." "What kind of stories?" asked. "Adventure stories about kids who discover magic farms and have to save the animals from mean people," Sophie explained. "Mom makes them up just for us." Felt another pang of loss. 3 years of bedtime stories he would never hear, of shared adventures and inside jokes and family traditions that had developed without him. "Are you sad?" Jack asked with surprising perceptiveness. "You look like you're thinking about something sad." Was startled by the observation. "I was just thinking about some things I missed," he said carefully. "Like what?" "Jack," Sarah intervened, approaching from where she had been watching from the porch. "Remember what we talked about, not everyone wanting to share their private thoughts." "It's okay," said again. "I was thinking about how I used to be too busy with work to notice things like bird feathers and shiny rocks. I forgot how much fun exploring could be." "Work is important," Sophie said seriously. But playing is important too. Mom says you have to have both. Mom is right about that too. Emma tugged on sleeve. Do you want to see our favorite hiding spot? It's secret, but we can show you because you're good at finding treasures. I would be honored to see your secret hiding spot. The three children exchanged glances, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Then Sophie nodded decisively. Okay, but you have to promise not to tell any other grown-ups. I promise. They led him to what looked like an ordinary section of fence near the creek, but Emma showed him how to squeeze through a gap that wasn't visible from a distance. Beyond the fence was a small clearing surrounded by wild berry bushes, with a fallen log arranged like a bench and a collection of interesting rocks arranged in careful patterns. This is where we come to think about things, Jack explained, and sometimes to talk about stuff when Mom is busy with work. We found it ourselves, Emma added proudly. We cleared out all the thorny plants and made it comfortable. It's beautiful, said and meant it. The clearing had a peaceful quality, sheltered from the wind and filled with dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. It was the kind of place he would have loved as a child if he had ever taken the time to look for such places. Sometimes we pretend we're explorers who discovered a new land, Sophie said, or scientists studying the animals and plants. Or pirates hiding treasure, Emma added. Or just kids who want to watch the clouds, Jack finished quietly. Sat on the fallen log, and the three children arranged themselves around him with the casual intimacy of people completely comfortable with each other. For a moment, nobody spoke, just enjoying the peaceful sounds of the creek and the rustling leaves. Do you have kids? Sophie asked suddenly. The question hit like a physical blow. These children, his children, didn't know he was their father. They saw him as just another adult in their world, someone to share treasures and secret places with. No, he said carefully. I don't have any children. Do you want kids? Emma asked with the directness that seemed to run in his genetic line. I didn't think I did, answered honestly. But spending time with you three has made me realize I might have been wrong about that. Kids are a lot of work, Jack observed seriously. But they're also really fun. Mom says we're worth the work, though. I'm sure you are. If you ever do get kids, Sophie said thoughtfully, you should bring them here to visit. We could show them all the good hiding spots and teach them about the animals. That's very kind of you to offer. We like sharing things, Emma said. Mom says good things are better when you share them with people. Felt his chest tighten with emotion. These children were generous and kind, confident and curious. Sarah had raised them to be everything he had been too busy to become. We should probably head back, Sarah's voice called from beyond the fence. It's almost time for lunch. As they made their way back to the farmhouse, the children chattered about their morning adventure, debating whether the feathers Emma had found came from a hawk or an eagle, and planning their afternoon activities. Found himself wishing the morning could last forever. Back at the house, Sarah invited to stay for lunch, though he could see the reservation in her eyes. The children insisted he sit between Jack and Emma, and Sophie carefully arranged everyone's plates with the precision of an experienced hostess. Lunch was simple but delicious. Sandwiches made with fresh bread and vegetables from the garden, accompanied by homemade soup and glasses of cold milk. Couldn't remember the last time he had eaten food that wasn't prepared by restaurant chefs or catered for business meetings. This is really good," he told Sarah. "Thank you. Everything's from the farm except the bread, and I'm working on learning to make that too." "Mom is learning lots of new things," Jack explained. "She says living here means you have to know how to do lots of stuff yourself. Like fixing the truck when it makes weird noises," Emma added. "And understanding why the chickens sometimes don't lay eggs," Sophie finished. "It sounds like your mom has become quite an expert at farm life." "She has," the children agreed in unison, clearly proud of their mother's accomplishments. As lunch wound down, realized his time with the children was coming to an end. He had to return to Seattle for a board meeting the next morning, and he still hadn't processed everything he had learned today. "I have to go soon," he announced reluctantly. "Or will you come back?" Jack asked immediately. "I hope so." "You should," Emma said firmly. "We could show you more places next time, and maybe you could meet the chickens properly." "And I could make you a better treasure map," Sophie offered. "One with more hiding spots." "I would like that very much." As prepared to leave, the children each hugged him goodbye with the unconscious affection of people who had accepted him into their world. Standing on the porch, watching his SUV disappear down the dirt road, Sarah felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to crack. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that she had made the right choice in keeping the children's existence from. She had built a good life for them here, away from the complications of wealth and media attention, and a father who might see them as obligations rather than blessings. But watching with the children today had shown her glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. The man who could be completely present when he chose to be, who brought intensity and focus to whatever held his attention. For a few hours, he had set aside his billionaire persona and just been a man playing with children, and he had been genuinely good at it. The question now was whether he could sustain that commitment, whether he could choose being a father over being a business empire, whether he was capable of the kind of fundamental life change that real parenthood would require. As car disappeared around the bend, Sarah realized that her children's future, and possibly her own, hung in the balance of that choice. The safe world she had built for them was about to spend the entire flight back to Seattle staring out the window of his private jet, seeing not clouds and mountain ranges, but 3 small faces filled with trust and curiosity. His business suit, still bearing traces of hay and mud despite his assistant's attempts to clean it, felt like armor he was no longer sure he wanted to wear. The board meeting the next morning was a disaster. Found himself distracted, checking his phone for messages from Sarah that never came, and losing track of quarterly projections that had seemed critically important just 2 days ago. When the CFO asked for his input on the proposed acquisition of a startup in Singapore, realized he had been thinking about Jack's gentle way with animals instead of listening to the presentation. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" he asked, earning surprised looks from around the conference table. After the meeting, his assistant cornered him in his office. "Sir, is everything all right? You seemed unusually distracted today." Looked at a brilliant woman who had been managing his schedule and business affairs for 5 years. She knew him better than almost anyone, could anticipate his needs and decisions with frightening accuracy. But how could he explain what had happened in Montana? Do you have children?" She blinked in surprise. In 5 years of working together, had never asked her a personal question that wasn't directly related to scheduling conflicts with her family obligations. "Yes, sir. I have 2 daughters, 8 and 10 years old." "Do you enjoy being a mother?" "Sir, with respect, you've never shown any interest in my personal life before. Is this related to a business matter?" Realized how strange his question must sound. "No, it's not business. I'm just curious about what parenthood is like." Studied his face carefully. "It's the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done. It changes everything about how you see the world and what matters to you. Why do you ask?" "What if you discovered you had children you didn't know about? Children who had been raised without you?" "That's an unusual hypothetical question, sir." "A humor mate." Sat down across from his desk, her expression becoming more personal than professional. "I think I would be devastated, not just because I had missed their childhood, but because of all the ways I would be a stranger to them. Children don't care about your accomplishments or your wealth. They care about whether you show up, whether you understand their world, whether you can be trusted with their feelings." Do you think someone could learn to be a good parent if they started late?" "Anyone can learn, but it requires giving up the idea that you can control the timeline or the outcome. Children operate on their own schedule with their own priorities. Being a parent means your agenda becomes secondary to their needs." Thought about his carefully structured life, where every hour was scheduled and every decision measured against quarterly objectives. The idea of surrendering that control was both terrifying and oddly appealing. Thank you for your honesty." "Sir, if this isn't hypothetical, if this is about a real situation, I hope you'll consider what you're capable of changing about your life. Children deserve better than part-time parents who fit them in between meetings." That evening, sat in his Seattle penthouse, looking out over the city lights and thinking about a small farmhouse in Montana. His home was a showcase of expensive furniture and modern art, everything chosen by professional designers to project success and sophistication. But it felt hollow compared to the warmth of Sarah's kitchen, with its children's drawings on the refrigerator and toys scattered across well-worn furniture. He called his lawyer. "David, I need you to look into something for me. Wellington Acquisitions bought a defaulted mortgage on a property in Montana. I want to know all the details about the foreclosure proceedings and the current legal status." "Of course. Is there a problem with the acquisition?" "Possibly. The current resident is someone I know personally. and the situation is more complicated than I initially understood. Do you want us to expedite the eviction proceedings? No, I want you to explore options for resolving this without displacement. David's surprise was evident even through the phone. Sir, that's not typically how we handle defaulted mortgages. The property was acquired specifically because the market value exceeds the outstanding debt. I understand the financial implications, but I want alternatives. After hanging up, poured himself a glass of expensive wine and tried to imagine what his life would look like if he made space in it for 3 children. Board meetings would have to be rescheduled for school events. Business trips would need to accommodate custody arrangements. His carefully managed public image would include family considerations. The more he thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. His business empire required constant attention, immediate responses to market changes, and flexibility to travel anywhere at any time. How could he maintain that while also being the kind of father Emma, Jack, and Sophie deserved? But then he remembered Jack's gentle concern for his sisters, Sophie's natural leadership, and Emma's fearless curiosity. These were qualities that would serve them well in any environment, traits that suggested they had inherited not just his physical features, but also his drive and intelligence. Maybe the question wasn't whether he could fit them into his world, but whether he could adapt his world to include them. The next morning did something unprecedented. He canceled all his meetings for the day. Sir looked confused as she reviewed his cleared calendar. The Tokyo partners are expecting your call at 9, and the product development team has been waiting 3 weeks for your approval on the new interface designs. Reschedule everything. I need to think about some major decisions, and I can't do that while managing the daily operations. For how long? I don't know yet. Spent the day walking around Seattle, something he hadn't done since moving there 10 years ago. He wandered through Pike Place Market, watching families navigate the crowds together, parents keeping track of excited children while sharing small adventures and discoveries. He sat in coffee shops and observed fathers reading stories to toddlers, mothers patiently answering endless questions from curious kids. In Pioneer Square, he watched a man teaching his young daughter to feed pigeons, both of them laughing when the birds became overly enthusiastic. The man's clothes were ordinary. His car was at least 10 years old, but the joy on his daughter's face was worth more than any quarterly profit report had ever received. That evening, he called Sarah. Her voice was cautious. Is everything all right? I've been thinking about yesterday, about the children, about everything. And I want to be their father, Sarah. Not just financially, but really be their father. I know I don't know how yet, and I know I have a lot to learn, but I want to try. There was a long pause. What does that mean exactly? Because wanting and doing are still 2 different things. It means I'm willing to make changes, big changes, to how I work, where I live, what I prioritize. You've built your entire identity around your business success. You can't just flip a switch and become a family man. Maybe not overnight, but I can start. I can learn. What about your company? your responsibilities. You have thousands of employees and investors who depend on you. I can delegate more, hire better managers, build systems that don't require my constant involvement. You say that now, but what happens when there's a crisis? When a competitor threatens your market share or a product launch goes wrong? Will you choose a school play over an emergency board meeting? Didn't have an immediate answer for that question, and his silence spoke volumes. That's what I thought, Sarah said quietly. I won't put the children through the disappointment of having a father who's always promising to be there but never actually showing up. Then help me figure out how to show up. Help me learn how to be the father they deserve. It's not my job to teach you how to be a parent. That's something you have to want badly enough to figure out on your own. I do want it. Yesterday with them was the first time in years I felt like I was doing something that mattered more than profit margins. One afternoon doesn't make you a father. No, but it's a start. Sarah, I'm asking for a chance, not to disrupt their lives, but to gradually become part of them. And what about the farm? What about the foreclosure proceedings that are happening because of your company's acquisition of our mortgage? Had been waiting for this topic. I've instructed my legal team to halt all eviction proceedings. The property situation can be resolved without displacing you and the children. Just like that, you wave your hand and make the problem disappear. Sarah, I didn't know you were living there when my company acquired the debt. If I had known, this never would have happened. But it did happen, and it's a perfect example of how your business decisions affect real people in ways you never consider. How do I trust you with our children when you can't even keep track of who gets hurt by your investments? The criticism stung because it was accurate. Had built his wealth on the foundation of calculated risks and strategic acquisitions, rarely considering the human cost of his business decisions. The Montana farm was just one example of how his pursuit of profit had real consequences for real families. You're right, he said. I haven't been paying attention to the human impact of my business practices, but learning about you and the children has opened my eyes to things I've been ignoring. Opening your eyes isn't enough. These children need consistency and reliability. They need someone who will be there for the ordinary moments, not just the dramatic ones. Then let me prove that I can be that person. How? Let me spend time with them, not as a stranger visiting, but as someone who's learning to be part of their lives. Let me show you that I can put them first. And when your business needs you more than they do, then I'll choose them. You say that now, but you've never had to make that choice before. Your entire life has been structured around avoiding exactly those kinds of conflicts. Thought about words about surrendering control, about children operating on their own schedules with their own priorities. Maybe it's time I learned to structure my life differently. Maybe, but if you start this process and then change your mind, if you decide being a father is too complicated or inconvenient, these children will be devastated. They've never had a father, so they've never experienced that kind of abandonment. I won't let you introduce that possibility into their lives unless you're absolutely certain you can follow through. Or what would it take to convince you I'm serious? Time, consistency, proof that you can sustain this commitment when it's difficult, not just when it's new and exciting. How much time? I don't know, but you need to understand something. Even if you prove you can be a good father, that doesn't automatically fix everything between us. We're not a family that you can just rejoin. We're people who built a life without you, and any relationship we have going forward will be different from what we had before. Well, I understand that. Do you? Because I see you approaching this the way you approach business acquisitions. Like if you make the right moves and invest enough resources, you can get the outcome you want. But families don't work like that. Then tell me how they do work. They work on trust and patience and forgiveness. They work when people choose each other every day, not just when it's convenient. They work when everyone's needs matter, not just the person with the most power. Felt the weight of what Sarah was describing. His business success had come from his ability to control variables and dictate terms. Family life would require him to give up that control, to become part of something larger than himself. I want to learn, he said again. Then prove it, not with words or grand gestures, but with small, consistent actions over time. Show me that Emma, Jack, and Sophie matter to you more than your quarterly earnings reports. Where do I start? By figuring out what kind of father you want to be, and what you're willing to sacrifice to become that person. After they hung up, sat in his penthouse, surrounded by symbols of his success, but feeling more uncertain than he had since his company's early days. Building a business empire had required vision, strategy, and relentless execution. Building relationships with his children would require skills he had never developed, qualities he wasn't sure he possessed. But for the first time in his adult life, the challenge ahead of him mattered more than any profit potential or market opportunity. Emma, Jack, and Sophie deserved better than a part-time father who fit them in between meetings. They deserved someone who chose them first, every day. The question was whether Wellington, billionaire business mogul, could transform himself into Wellington, devoted father, and whether he could make that transformation quickly enough to 2 weeks later, found himself standing in the toy aisle of a Target store in Missoula, Montana, completely overwhelmed by the choices in front of him. He had driven 3 hours from the farm to buy presents for Emma, Jack, and Sophie, but nothing seemed right. Everything was either too expensive and elaborate or too cheap and generic. He wanted something that showed he understood them as individuals, not just as generic children. His phone buzzed with urgent messages from his Seattle office. A competitor had announced a product launch that threatened one of Wellington Tech's key revenue streams. His board was demanding an immediate strategic response, and his legal team needed decisions on 3 different acquisition deals. 6 months ago, he would have been on a plane within an hour, focused entirely on protecting his market position. Instead, turned off his phone and kept shopping. He finally settled on a set of high-quality colored pencils and a sketch pad for Sophie's map-making talents. a comprehensive field guide to Montana wildlife for Jack's animal interests, and a climbing harness designed for children Emma's age, along with a promise to build her a proper climbing structure on the farm. The drive back to Sarah's farm gave him time to think about the conversation he needed to have with his children. Sarah had agreed to let him visit regularly, but with strict conditions. He could not reveal his identity as their father until both parents agreed the children were ready for that information. He could not disrupt their routines or make promises about the future that he might not keep. And most importantly, he had to prove his commitment through consistent actions over time. When he arrived at the farm, the children greeted him with genuine excitement. Over the past 2 weeks, he had visited 3 times, each time learning more about their personalities and preferences. Emma had taught him the proper technique for climbing the oak tree behind the barn. Jack had introduced him to each chicken individually, explaining their distinct personalities and egg-laying habits. Sophie had created an elaborate map of the entire property, marking every important location with careful precision. "You came back," Emma announced, racing toward his car with her characteristic fearlessness. "I told you I would," replied, realizing how much their trust meant to him. "Did you bring the climbing stuff you promised?" Emma asked hopefully. "I brought some supplies to start building you a proper climbing area, but we'll need to plan it out carefully first." "Can I help plan?" Sophie interjected, appearing with one of her detailed maps. "I already drew where I think it should go." "Of course, we'll need your planning skills to make sure it's safe and fun." Jack approached more quietly, still carrying the barn cat that seemed permanently attached to him. "Did you bring anything for Whiskers? He's been asking about you." Smiled at Jack's earnest concern for the cat's feelings. "I brought some special treats for Whiskers and something for you too." The gift exchange took place on the front porch, with Sarah watching from the doorway. Had learned that the children shared everything equally, so each gift came with enough supplies for all 3 to participate. The colored pencils would be used for collaborative art projects. The wildlife guide would help all of them identify animals they encountered, and the climbing equipment would eventually create fun for everyone. "These pencils are really good," Sophie observed, testing different colors on her sketch pad. "Much better than the ones from the general store." "I thought you might like to make some detailed maps with them," said. "I could make you a map of Seattle," she offered, "if you tell me about the important places there." "That's a wonderful idea." Jack was absorbed in the wildlife guide, pointing out animals he had already spotted on the farm. "Look, there's a picture of the hawk family that lives in the dead tree by the creek, and here are the deer that visit our garden. Maybe we could go on a nature walk and see how many animals from the book we can find," suggested. "Yes, can we do that now?" Emma had been examining the climbing harness with the focus of a serious athlete. "This looks really professional. Do you know how to use climbing equipment?" "I learned rock climbing in college, but it's been a long time. I thought maybe we could learn together how to use this safely." "I would like that. Mom worries when I climb too high, but if we had safety equipment, maybe she wouldn't worry so much." That afternoon, experienced the joy of seeing the world through children's eyes. Their nature walk became an adventure as Jack identified birds, tracks, and plants with the enthusiasm of a professional naturalist. Sophie documented their route and discoveries on an increasingly detailed map. Emma found increasingly creative ways to navigate obstacles, turning fallen logs into balance beams and large rocks into climbing challenges. When they discovered a family of deer grazing near the creek, all three children fell silent with wonder, watched them watching the deer, struck by their capacity for quiet appreciation alongside their boundless energy. They're beautiful," Sophie whispered. "The bobbies are called fawns," Jack added softly. "They stay with their mothers for about a year." "I wish I could climb like they do," Emma said. "They make it look so easy to jump over things." For the moment crystallized something important about fatherhood. It wasn't about providing expensive experiences or teaching profound lessons. It was about being present for moments of wonder, sharing discoveries that cost nothing but attention. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, and Sarah sat on the front porch talking while the sunset painted the mountains pink and gold. "Oh, they're amazing kids," said. "They are, and they're starting to get attached to you, which worries me." "Why does that worry you?" "Because attachment creates vulnerability. If you decide this is too hard or too complicated, they'll be hurt in ways they've never experienced before." "I'm not going to disappear from their lives, Sarah." "How can you be so certain? Your phone has been buzzing constantly all afternoon. How many business emergencies are you ignoring right now?" Pulled out his phone and showed her the screen full of missed calls and urgent messages. 17 missed calls from my office, 43 unread emails marked urgent, and 3 voice messages from my board chairman. "And you're sitting here instead of dealing with them." "Oh, yes." "For how long? How long before you decide that whatever crisis they're calling about is more important than bedtime stories and nature walks?" "Sarah, 3 weeks ago I would have left immediately. The fact that I'm still here, that I chose to turn off my phone and focus on the children, should tell you something about how my priorities are changing. Or it could mean you're still in the honeymoon phase of this decision. It's easy to choose family when it's new and exciting. It's harder when it becomes routine, when children need you to show up for ordinary moments instead of special adventures." Thought about that. Sarah was right that his recent visits had felt like adventures, breaks from his normal routine rather than a new way of living. But wasn't that how change happened, one choice at a time? "What would convince you that I'm serious about this?" "Consistency over time. Choosing them when it's inconvenient. Figuring out how to integrate being a father into your daily life instead of treating it like a hobby you pursue on weekends." "Then let me do that. Let me spend more time here, not just for visits, but as part of building a real relationship with them." "Well, what does that mean practically?" "It means I need to restructure my business operations so I can be present for more than just occasional visits. It means learning to be a father gradually, with your guidance, instead of trying to figure everything out from a distance. You can't just decide to move to Montana and play house with us. These children need stability, not disruption. I'm not suggesting we play house. I'm suggesting that we figure out how to co-parent effectively, how to give Emma, Jack, and Sophie the benefit of both parents in their lives. Co-parent, we're not a couple. We're divorced people who happen to share children. That's a very different thing from a family unit. I understand that, but we can still work together to raise them, can't we? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. It would require a lot of trust, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of cooperation with you. What would it take to build that trust? Time, honesty, and proof that you can put their needs ahead of your own consistently. Then let me start proving that, not with grand gestures, but with small, everyday choices. Such as spending enough time here to help with their daily routines. School pickups, bedtime stories, homework help. The ordinary stuff that actually matters. You would do that. Leave your empire to help with homework and bedtime routines. I would learn to do that. Sarah, these past few weeks have shown me that I've been measuring success by the wrong metrics. Building a relationship with my children matters more than building market share. That's easy to say when you've only seen the fun parts of parenting. What about when they're sick and cranky? When they have nightmares? When they refuse to cooperate and you're exhausted and nothing you try works? Then I'll figure it out with your help. I'll learn to handle the difficult moments along with the easy ones. Sarah turned to look at him directly. If you're serious about this, it means fundamentally changing who you are. Are you prepared for that? I think I already started changing the moment I met them. Change is scary, especially when it means giving up things that have defined you for so long. Maybe it's time I was defined by something more important than quarterly profit reports. The conversation was interrupted by a small voice from inside the house. Mom, I had a bad dream. Sarah immediately stood up. That's Jack. He sometimes has nightmares about animals being in danger. Can I help? Asked. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Come with me, but let me handle it first, and you can observe how we normally deal with this. They found Jack sitting up in his bed, tears on his cheeks, clutching a stuffed rabbit that hadn't seen before. His sisters were still sleeping soundly in their adjacent beds. What was the dream about, sweetheart? Sarah asked softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. The chickens were lost in the woods, and I couldn't find them to bring them home, Jack whispered. They were scared and calling for help. That does sound scary, but remember our chickens are safe in their coop. Do you want to look out the window and see them? Jack nodded, and Sarah carried him to the window where they could see the chicken coop in the moonlight, secure and peaceful. See, they're all safe at home. But what if something happens to them while we're sleeping? That's what the coop is for, to keep them safe at night. And remember, animals are very good at taking care of themselves. Watched this exchange, struck by Sarah's patience and gentleness. She didn't dismiss Jack's fears or try to logic them away. Instead, she acknowledged his feelings and provided concrete reassurance. Would you like me to tell you a story about brave chickens who know how to stay safe? Sarah offered. Yes, please, but can hear the story too. He likes animals. Sarah looked at questioningly, and he nodded. I would love to hear a story about brave chickens. Jack settled back into his bed, and Sarah began weaving a tale about a flock of chickens who worked together to protect their farm from various threats, using teamwork and intelligence rather than fighting. Listened, fascinated by how naturally Sarah created a narrative that addressed Jack's specific fears while also entertaining and educational. When the story ended, Jack was drowsy and peaceful. Thank you, Mom, thank you. You're welcome, buddy. Sweet dreams. As they left Jack's room, felt he had witnessed something profound about parenthood. It wasn't just about the fun adventures and special moments. It was about being available for fears and insecurities, for the ordinary struggles that children faced as they tried to understand their world. That was beautiful, he told Sarah quietly. That's what I mean about the everyday parts of being a parent. Jack has nightmares about twice a week. Emma sometimes gets overwhelmed and needs help calming down. Sophie occasionally gets frustrated when her projects don't turn out the way she planned. Being a parent means being available for all of it, not just the photogenic moments. I want to be available for all of it. We'll see, but if you're going to be part of their lives, it has to be all the way. These children don't deserve a part-time father who shows up when it's convenient. I understand, and I'm ready to prove that I can be the father they deserve. Looking at him in the moonlight, Sarah saw something in his expression that reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. Determined, focused, but also vulnerable in a way that success and wealth had taught him to hide. 6 months later, stood in the kitchen of the Montana farmhouse at 6:30 a.m., making breakfast for 3 very sleepy children. Emma sat at the table with her hair sticking up at impossible angles. Sophie was methodically arranging her napkin and silverware in precise alignment, and Jack was quietly feeding small pieces of toast to Whiskers under the table. The transformation in his life had been dramatic and difficult. He had relocated his primary residence to Montana, keeping only a small apartment in Seattle for essential business travel. He had restructured Wellington Tech's leadership, promoting trusted executives to handle day-to-day operations while he focused on strategic oversight that could be managed remotely. The transition had not been smooth. He had lost 2 major clients who demanded more direct access, and his stock price had fluctuated as investors worried about his reduced involvement. But sitting in this kitchen, watching his children wake up slowly and arguing quietly about who got the last piece of bacon, felt more successful than any business deal had ever made him feel. Daddy, Emma is making faces at me, Sophie complained, though her tone suggested this was more routine than genuinely upsetting. I'm not making faces, I'm stretching my face muscles, Emma replied with perfect logic. Mom says stretching is good for you. Face muscles don't need stretching, Sophie argued. How do you know? You're not a face muscle expert. Had learned to navigate these morning negotiations over the past few months. Emma, maybe save the face muscle exercises for after breakfast. Sophie, would you like to help me pack the lunches today? The children had learned his identity as their father 3 months ago, a conversation that had gone more smoothly than either parent had expected. Emma had declared it cool that their regular visitor was actually their dad. Jack had been thrilled to learn that his love of animals was something he had inherited. Sophie had immediately begun planning ways to incorporate this new information into her understanding of family structure. "Can we visit your city office sometime?" Sophie asked as she carefully arranged sandwich ingredients. "I want to see where you used to work all the time." "We could arrange that," said, "though it's not nearly as interesting as the farm." "Everything is interesting if you look at it the right way," Jack observed, apparently quoting something Sarah had told him. That wisdom came from Sarah, who had slowly allowed to become a true co-parent. The process had required patience, compromise, and several difficult conversations about boundaries and expectations. They weren't a romantic couple, but they had developed a partnership focused entirely on what was best for Emma, Jack, and Sophie. Sarah appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for work. Her graphic design business had grown significantly over the past months, partly because had quietly recommended her services to several of his business contacts. She was now handling branding projects for companies across the country, work that allowed her to maintain their rural lifestyle while building financial security. "Morning, everyone," she said, accepting a cup of coffee from with a grateful smile. "Jack, remember you have soccer practice after school. Sophie, your art class moved to Thursday this week. Emma, please try not to climb anything today that requires medical attention." "I only needed medical attention that one time," Emma protested, "and it was just a Band-Aid." "Two Band-Aids," corrected. "I was there, remember." The morning routine continued with the comfortable chaos that had learned was normal for families. Backpacks were packed, lunch boxes distributed, teeth brushed, and small emergencies addressed. Jack discovered that his favorite stuffed animal was missing and required a full-scale search operation. Sophie realized she had forgotten to finish her math homework and needed 10 minutes of focused assistance. Emma announced that she had her favorite shoes overnight and needed new ones immediately. Had learned that being a parent meant being constantly adaptable, ready to solve problems he had never anticipated and make decisions without complete information. It was both more challenging and more rewarding than running a billion-dollar company. "Daddy, will you be here when we get home?" Jack asked as they prepared to leave for school. "I'll be here," assured him. "I'm working from home today, and then we're going to work on your climbing structure project." "And I get to help plan," Sophie added. "And I get to test it first," Emma declared. "We all get to help with everything," said. "That's how families work." After the children left for school, and Sarah lingered over coffee, discussing logistics for the day. These morning conversations had become an important part of their co-parenting routine, a time to coordinate schedules and address any concerns about the children. "The school called yesterday," Sarah said. "They want to schedule parent-teacher conferences next week." "Both of us?" asked. "They requested both parents, yes. Are you comfortable with that?" had learned that public appearances as a family unit required careful navigation. The children's school and the local community had gradually accepted his presence in their lives, but he was always conscious of maintaining appropriate boundaries with Sarah. I think it's important for the teachers to see that the children have two committed parents, he said. What time works for you? A Thursday at 3:30. Can you make that work with your schedule? I'll make it work. This was another change in his life. 6 months ago, he would have demanded that important meetings be scheduled around his availability. Now he adapted his schedule to accommodate his children's needs. Spent the morning working from the small office he had set up in what used to be a spare bedroom. His video conferences with the Seattle team had become routine, and he had learned to be more efficient with his time and clearer in his communication. He was still intimately involved in major strategic decisions, but he had delegated operational management to people he trusted. The adjustment had been difficult for everyone involved. His board had initially resisted his reduced physical presence, and several key employees had struggled with the new chain of command. But after 6 months, the company was performing well under the distributed leadership structure, and had proven that strategic oversight didn't require his physical presence in every meeting. Around noon, his assistant called with an urgent matter. A major client was threatening to cancel their contract unless personally flew to New York for emergency negotiations. 2 years ago, this would have sent him rushing to the airport without question. "What's our backup position if we lose this client?" asked. "We can absorb the revenue loss, but it would impact the quarterly projections significantly. The board won't be happy. Schedule a video conference for first thing Monday morning. I'll handle the negotiations remotely, and if that's not sufficient for the client, we'll develop alternative strategies." Sir, this client specifically demanded face-to-face meetings. They've made it clear that video conferences won't be acceptable. Looked out the window at the climbing structure he had been building with the children, half finished, but already generating enormous excitement. Emma, Jack, and Sophie would be home from school in 3 hours, expecting him to be there to continue their project. Then we'll need to find a way to meet their needs that doesn't require me to abandon my family commitments on short notice, said. Maybe we can offer to bring the entire negotiating team to New York next week, or propose alternative concessions that demonstrate our commitment to the partnership. The client may not accept those alternatives. Then we'll deal with that consequence, but I'm not available to travel today. After hanging up, felt the familiar tension that came with these decisions. Choosing his children over business opportunities still felt unnatural, like fighting against years of ingrained priorities. But each time he made that choice, it became slightly easier. When the children arrived home from school that afternoon, was waiting with construction materials and safety equipment, ready to continue work on Emma's climbing structure. The project had evolved into a collaborative effort that incorporated Sophie's planning skills and Jack's understanding of how different animals moved through their environment. "Can we add a rope bridge?" Emma asked immediately, dropping her backpack and examining the day's progress. That's not on my original plan, Sophie pointed out, consulting her detailed drawings. Plans can be modified, said, something he had learned from watching Sarah navigate the children's constantly evolving ideas. Let's see if we can figure out how to add a rope bridge safely. The afternoon passed quickly as they worked together, measuring and cutting wood, testing joints and connections, and debating the best approaches to various challenges. Found these collaborative projects deeply satisfying in ways that business negotiations had never been. The children approached problems with creativity and persistence, unencumbered by the fear of failure that often paralyzed adults. This is going to be the best climbing structure ever, Jack declared as they secured a series of wooden handholds. It's going to be unique, at least, agreed. That's better than best, Sophie said thoughtfully. Best means compared to other things, unique means special just for us. As the sun began to set, Sarah arrived home from her day of client meetings in town, finding her family covered in sawdust and completely absorbed in their construction project. How did the work go today? She asked as they cleaned up tools. Good progress on the climbing structure, and I managed the New York client situation without traveling. Was that difficult? Yes and no. The decision was difficult, but I'm confident it was the right choice. My business will survive one lost client, but my children won't get these afternoons back. Sarah studied his face. 6 months ago, you wouldn't have been able to make that choice. 6 months ago, I didn't understand what I was choosing between. That evening, as read bedtime stories to Jack and Sophie, while Emma practiced her climbing techniques on the new structure outside, he reflected on how completely his life had changed. His net worth had decreased slightly as he focused less intensively on aggressive growth strategies. His public profile had shifted as media attention followed his transition from workaholic billionaire to hands-on father. His daily routine bore no resemblance to the carefully managed schedule that had once defined his existence. But Emma's fearless laughter as she conquered new climbing challenges, Jack's gentle concern for every creature on the farm, and Sophie's thoughtful observations about the world around her had become more valuable to him than any business achievement. Daddy, Jack asked sleepily as finished the evening's story, are you going to live here forever? I'm going to live here as long as you want me here, replied. I want you here forever. Then forever it is. Later that night, Az and Sarah sat on the front porch discussing the day's events and planning the next day's logistics. He realized that this quiet evening routine had become the most important part of his day. The conversations weren't about profit margins or market strategies, but about their children's development, their hopes for the future, and the countless small decisions that shaped family life. Do you ever miss it? Sarah asked. The excitement of high-stakes business deals, the adrenaline of corporate competition. Considered the question seriously. I miss some aspects of it. The intellectual challenge, the sense of building something significant. But I've discovered that raising children provides all of those same elements, plus a deeper sense of purpose. You've surprised me. I honestly didn't think you were capable of this kind of transformation. I'm not sure I was capable of it until I met them. Emma, Jack, and Sophie didn't just give me a reason to change. They showed me who I could become. As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear over the Montana mountains, felt a profound sense of completion. He had spent years building financial success, accumulating wealth and influence and professional recognition. But none of those achievements had provided the deep satisfaction he found in being trusted by three small children who saw him not as a billionaire business mogul, but simply as their father. The farmhouse behind them was filled with the sounds of a family settling into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures, homework to supervise, problems to solve, and countless small moments that would shape his children's understanding of the world. Couldn't imagine wanting to be anywhere else. He had discovered that the most important investment he could make wasn't in stocks or real estate or business acquisitions. It was in time spent with Emma, Jack, and Sophie, building relationships that would enrich all their lives for years to come. And unlike his business empire, this was success that no market downturn or competitive threat could ever take away from him. Maybe, she thought, people really could change. Maybe becoming a father could transform in ways that building a business empire never had. But only time would tell if his commitment could survive the challenges ahead. Earn a place in the lives of children who had learned to thrive without him. Become much more complicated whether chose to be part of their lives or not. Sarah opened the back door and followed her toward the barn where his children were playing, unaware that their entire world was about to change forever.